Welcome to The Spectrum, brought to you by ABA Centers of America. I'm Dr. Ted Bender, clinical psychologist and mental health advocate. To learn more about us, please visit abacenters.com. Today, I'm speaking with the very talented actress and empowering woman, Tisha Campbell, about autism awareness.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Many know you for your roles in Martin, House Party, Uncoupled, and much, much more. But today you're here to talk about advocacy for autism disorders.
I'm just a mommy today.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just a mommy.
So again, we're so happy to have you here talking about this extremely important topic. I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your personal journey with autism and what brings you here speaking with us today.
Woo! Okay. Much like most people, especially during that time, I want to say 2001, there wasn't a lot of talk about autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know what it was until it actually affected my family. It's so interesting because I'm very protective of my child and my kids. So it's always been a little difficult for me to talk about this journey.
Mhm.
And I know how important it is to share and to show and see that there actually is hope, especially for the parents and the families who are affected by this diagnosis. So, I know that I need to speak up.
Well, yeah, and we thank you for that. And it is absolutely critical because you know personally what it was like to get that news.
The diagnosis is absolutely life-changing and crushing
Yeah.
to a parent. There's so many things that happen in that moment. With me and my son, he had already seen like 6 doctors.
Uh-huh.
He had seen 6 doctors and 5 doctors.
Uh-huh.
And this 6th one was going to be the very last person I was going to see. They had all said, oh, he's fine. He might have a couple of delays, but he's fine. He's just super intelligent because, of course, our kids display some delays, but then they have these amazing gifts. And so Zen was very much so like that. I will have to admit to a certain extent, the minute I brought him home from the hospital, I saw something. And the reason why I attribute me being an actor was that it was set up for this particular moment. Because, of course, my job is to master human emotions. And when I saw that there was a lack thereof with my child,
You noticed immediately.
I noticed immediately. And I was actually doing early intervention and floor time and didn't know that that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But after the 5th person, doctor, clinician who said, Zen is fine, but here's a behavioral therapist that I'll give you her number and, you can see her. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see this woman and she's probably going to tell me the same thing. And I'm going to stop being a overprotective mom or smother. And she came into my home. I didn't expect her that particular day after, working with Zen for a long time. My son's name is Zen, by the way. And I was in the garden and I was sitting there. I was chomping on a salad. Zen was in the swing and the babysitter was pushing him because I had just gotten home from work. And I just wanted to just take in this beautiful, amazing California sunny day. And she came in and she was like, can we go somewhere where, your husband isn't in earshot? And I was like, oh no, he's fine. He's working in his office. He's not going to come out. Just sit here. I wanted her to sit here in this moment with me. And she sat down and she says, well, I have something to tell you. Your son is on the spectrum. And although I knew, inside I knew that he was on the spectrum, at that moment, I did not want to hear her say that to me. And if I could find this woman, I don't even know what her name is, but I cussed her out so badly, that poor lady. I cursed her for filth. You hear me? Every word that I could possibly like have mastered or just knew that was, that was a foul word that could come out of my mouth, regurgitated.
She got it all.
Oh, she got everything. She got a mouthful. And after a while, I told her to get out of my house, and I said, no, you stay here. I'll run. So I ran away, and I ran to the house. I entered the back door, and I remember screaming. I don't remember screaming. I remember hearing this howling sound. And I was like, whose dog is that? Shut that dog up, right? Somebody please shut the dog up. And then I realized it was me. I was the one who was howling. I was the one who was screaming. And I was like, it was a surreal moment. Like, this can't be happening to my son. This can't be happening to my family. This can't be happening to us. And I remember saying, God, I can't handle this. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to my baby? I can't handle it. As I'm screaming, I can't handle it. I'm picking up my computer, looking up, all these, the search engine for autism. I'm picking up the phone. Hello, my name is Tisha Campbell. My son was just diagnosed. I would like to see if we could be seen. To hang up the phone. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. Hello, my name is Tisha Campbell.
Yeah.
You hear the old adage of God only gives you what you can handle. And even in that moment, I thought, I can't handle it, but I was handling it. When I look back and think about that moment. And then after that was a Friday.
Yeah.
After that, I called Holly Robinson Pete. She was one of the first people I knew to call. She's been an advocate for, the autism community for so long. And she was the only person that I knew that had, a child with this diagnosis at that time, and who was African American and had that diagnosis at that time. And so I called her and I said, Holly, they just told me my baby is autistic. And I'm crying. And she was like, baby, I'm so sorry. I understand where you are. Okay, are you ready? Her whole voice flipped. And it made me pay attention. It took me outside of myself. She was like, are you ready? You're going to have to drive to different appointments. You're going to be immersed in it. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
And Tisha, this is really important. You have time on your side. How long has, at what age is he right now? I said, he's 23 months. She's like, oh my God, what I would do with 23 months. Oh my God, what I would do with that time. She said, you need to hear me. And I mean, again, her voice was so authoritative that it made me just kind of pay attention. And she said, Tisha, because time is not on your side. And what I mean by that is the earlier you can get these kids into early intervention, the better. She says, but with me and my family, and I hope I'm not out of turn speaking about this, but she's spoken about this publicly. She says, a lot of my family members were not on the same page.
Right.
They were in denial. And so we lost a lot of time with my child because they were countering a lot of the stuff and they wouldn't, they just were in denial. And she says, the one thing that you have to do is get your child and the people around your child on the same page with the therapist.
Yeah.
Whatever they tell you to do, do it. And when they're not around, do it. And make the people that's around you do it. And I was like, okay, got it. She says, you're going to be okay. And she says, I hate to give you this old euphemism, but it gets better. And that's one of the things as an autistic a mother of an autistic child or somebody that's on the spectrum, you feel so incredibly alone.
Hmm.
You feel by yourself. And sometimes you purposefully go inward because you believe that nobody else can understand what you're going through.
Right.
And there's so much, like, from the finances, autism is freaking expensive. And let alone if you are in an underserved
Hmm.
community, and we talk about all the time, you know, uh, Black and brown kids are usually diagnosed about 2 to 3 years after their Caucasian counterparts.
That's true.
And for a number of reasons,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
It could be, systematically where they live. They don't get the best. We may not get the best doctors. I say we because I come from a very, I was brought up in Newark, New Jersey, in a very poor area,
Mhm.
and I understand it very well. So for whatever the reasons are, people not being studied or had it on the subject matter of autism.
Right.
It could be, we don't get the same doctors. We don't get, and it's so interesting because I have a friend whose daughter was about, when I met her, about 23 years old. She is from an underserved area in Carson, California. Her mother was a principal, and she just didn't get the same resources.
There's so much I want to unpack there.
Yeah.
First things for our listeners, I think what you really hit on
Mhm.
is the emotion that you went through. And I
Yeah.
think you really made that very clear.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, for parents out there who may have just gotten this diagnosis, it is absolutely normal to go through those range of emotions that you just clearly expressed.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a grief reaction.
It is a
There's
grief.
yeah.
It is very much so
Yeah.
grief. As a matter of fact, after I spoke with Holly,
Mhm.
I took a second and said, okay, I don't have the time to feel sorry for him
Mhm.
or me or my family, but I got 3 days.
Yeah.
You have this weekend, Tisha, that you have to mourn the loss of the aspirations, the goals, and all of the things that you wanted for your child.
Right.
They have to be, you got to go back to the basics. You have to go back to, God, I hope he says hi. God, I hope he says ouch. God, I hope he could say, I love you, mommy. Something, someday. Even if it's sign language, even if it's grunting. I had to go back to the basics of the and mourn the loss of what I thought his life would be.
Exactly.
Or assumed his life would be.
And it is okay to go
And
through
it's
those
okay.
emotions. The next thing you said that I thought was very important was you had a friend that you reached out to and you had support.
I did.
That kind of helped to shift your mindset
It did.
into action.
Yeah.
Right. So it was critical to get that support.
Yeah, I had to get into action mode. And it was
Exactly.
critical to get that kind of support. She was like, you're lucky. She said this to me. She says, you're really lucky, Tisha, because you got me.
Yeah.
She says, I didn't have anybody.
Mhm.
Especially when her kids were diagnosed, because it was way earlier than, my child. And there wasn't a lot of resources. There wasn't a lot of anything that, she was really like,
Mhm.
taking stabs in the dark about what would be best for her child.
It's also very common, another thing you mentioned, all right, you're ready to attack this, you're ready to take action, but the family, people surround you, not only do they not know what's going on, they may not be on board, they may be in denial, as you mentioned, but it's often also time to get the whole family around.
You have to, because you have to look at it like this.
It's tough.
Like if you have to though, if you bring a therapist in
Yeah.
and the therapist is working with your child, right? When they leave, if somebody comes in and says, oh, because for me, this worked for me. I don't know if it works for everybody, but I limited electronics for my child, right? So if the grandmother comes in, anybody's grandmother, I'm just taking a stab, and says, oh, I'm going to let him watch cartoons all day long. So he's just sitting there rocking all day and there's no engagement. To me, it's like starting all over. In fact, the therapist said, everything that we accomplished in that day is erased. And that's what you have to tell the other family members and the people that's around.
Yeah.
Like, you could be deleting everything that person learned by doing the opposite of what the therapist has asked, or being in denial.
Yeah.
I even had, listen, I'm tough. Okay. And you gotta, and there are times where you're going to have to be tough. And I had to be tough with some of my family members and literally say, if you are not on the same page with me and the therapist, you will not have access to my child.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ABA Centers of America.
That's excellent and sage-like advice, honestly, because it's a tough thing you got to do. But you're absolutely right about one thing you said there was you can spend 8 hours working with the child all day, and in one moment or
somebody could just
erase
delete
all the progress.
Erase all the progress. That wasn't happening in my household.
I agree with you.
You know, my greatest what do you call it? My greatest goal for my son was to get him as independent of me as possible. That's all I wanted. I didn't, when I was mourning and I was praying, because I was like on my knees, but I'm one of those that gets on their knees, then I get up, then I do the work, right? And again, you guys can see, I get really passionate and I get really aggressive when it comes to my child or my children. But with that, you know, you literally have to get people on the same page, or you are going to erase all of the work that you did.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And also, you know, you hit on something that we preach a lot, early intervention. It's so critical. You mentioned going through 5 doctors before getting the proper diagnosis. What do you make of that? Why do you think it was so difficult for these first 5, and why did they miss it?
I think they just kept looking at how, you know, some of his accomplishments, how smart he was. You know, he wasn't talking.
Right.
But what I did was to reach him was I would put on his walls, I took down the basketball wallpaper because, of course, you know, his father had played, and I just assumed, you know, at that time, sure, I'm sure he'll play too. But again, you have to mourn the loss of the goals and the aspirations you had for your child and start at the basics. So I took all that down and I placed all these learning educational charts of geometry and letters and numerals all over his walls. And instead, in lieu of him, if he did something that was typical or something, or tried to communicate with me, even if it was sign language or a grunt, instead of giving him candy, in lieu of giving him a snack or something to celebrate, I would give him either a ton of attention, or we will walk over to these educational charts and we take a pointer and I would go, and we would go through each one, and he loved it. It was like a prize for him, but it was also teaching him phonics. And so he started to put the words together, even though he was not talking when he should have been talking. And I remember the first day he looked at the chart and he said the name, he said the letter, he said the number 8, points and says 8. And I said, say mommy, say daddy, say mommy, say daddy, say mommy, say daddy, say mommy, say daddy. Nothing for another couple of months, right? So then I overheard him say, Dada. I was like, say mommy, 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 say mommy. And nothing for almost 6 to 7 months.
So we start with 8 and Dada.
Dada. And then one day we're in his room. He points at the geometry chart and he says, parallelogram. I said, oh, see, you playing games. You are playing games. Oh, okay, I get it. You're in there. You're in there. You're inside of them. I just got to figure out a way to reach you. Again, the goal wasn't always to have him speaking back to me. The goal was to get eye contact or get some type of communication. Even if it was a grunt or a point,
Yes.
I'd wait him out. If he pointed, I wait him out and I go, oh, light, yeah, light. Is it a light?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to back up this story. So before the 5 doctors, 6 doctors, including the behavioral therapist, before the 5 doctors, I had some inkling that there was something up with the baby, is what I would tell all of my friends. And my friends would go, oh, no, nothing's wrong. You're just a new mom. Trust your instincts, mommies and daddies. Trust your instincts when you see something. And that has served me always. Now, this was about 18 months. About 18 months, his doctor called me and said, I need you to come in. I said, I can't. I'm on the set of My Wife and Kids. I'm here every day. We're doing 2 shows a day. I can't come to you. And she goes, well, I said, can you just tell me over the phone? She was like, I don't want to do that. I said, no. Please tell me. What are you going to tell me? My son's autistic? Now, I didn't know that word. I don't know why that word came out of my mouth. But she says, yes, I think he's on the spectrum. And my whole body, I fell out underneath myself and I landed on the floor. Now, thank God the floor was there because I needed that foundation, that stability to hold me together, because I'm one who doesn't show her emotions at work, right? I think it's not right. And so thank God nobody was around, because I just tears and I fell out. And then, but I'm talking to the doctor and I'm saying, okay, what do I need to do? What is it that I need to do? Who do I need to call? Who do I need to set up an appointment with? But I'm shaking, hang up the phone, and I'm bawling, and I run into the makeup room and I wash my face and I head straight out, pretend like nothing's wrong on the set. And I beeline to this woman who had been on the set with her child. Her child was one of the actors, and he was a brilliant child, amazing child. And she says, and I walk up to her. I don't know why I walked up to her. I keep my business to myself. And I looked at her and I said, the doctor just called me. They said my son might be autistic. And she goes, oh my God, thank God. So is my son. So am I. By the way, I've been meaning to tell you, please stop hugging me. Oh, woo! I've been wanting to get that out for a long time. I mean, that's all you do. You hug all day long. She says, and so congratulations. 2 of my kids are, 2 of my kids aren't. And the ones that aren't are the boring ones. And I'm sitting there, my mouth is dropped open, right? And I go, what do I do? She says, engage. She says, engage. All you got to do is engage. I said, so all of those times, and it made me think, oh, she used to pass by me and Zen in his stroller, and she was like, oh, your son reminds me of mine. Don't let him eat gluten. Oh, your son reminds me of mine. Don't let him watch TV. Oh, your son. And she would do that all the time, and it just kind of hit me. And so one of the things about me is when I get a piece of information, I snap onto that like a dog, she said the word engage. Engage. And I don't think I stopped talking to him till he was 5 years old. He would, the elevator, look at the elevator. Oh, the elevator goes up. We're walking into the elevator. The elevator doors are closing. Look at the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, look at that. Oh, do you feel your tummy? Like, I literally talked his head off. I talked that boy's head off. Engaging was really important. So going back to what you were saying about the 5 doctors. Somehow inside I kind of knew. I kind of knew what they were saying was not what the diagnosis should be. And that in turn, a lot of our kids that are minorities get the wrong diagnosis.
It's true. All the tactics that you mentioned, everything you put up on the wall, was the therapist helpful in helping you set that up and teaching you how to interact?
No, I actually ran into this woman her name was Tahuti, and she was a toddler tutor.
Huh.
And so she would do that with all her kids, but it was so helpful for my son with the colors and
Yeah.
because he would get overwhelmed really, really fast
Sure.
and overstimulated.
Mhm.
And so these charts helped regulate things for him. So it was just something that kind of organically happened,
Trial
but
and
it really does help.
Yeah.
Because especially, depending upon if they're a visual or auditory learner, we used both at the same time. Like I said, I would point
Right.
out the different numbers and colors and charts, and that was his big treat. You know what I mean?
And you got him to engage with
I
you.
got him to
and
engage.
that
It
was
was
the key.
engaging,
Yeah,
and
very
that is the
interesting.
key. And then my dad. My dad was one of the most amazing fathers. I grew up in a group home. I don't know if most people know that. My father was the group home father. My mother was the group home mother. We shared a home in New Jersey with 10 other boys,
Mhm.
my 3 brothers, and me.
Mhm.
And, you know, we did have a child who was on the spectrum there, but that was the most, we didn't know what to call it back then.
Yeah.
But my dad, he was the most engaging father and grandfather. And so I flew him out when I knew that I'd be working constantly. And so I had that one family member, that one person who could engage with Zen at all times.
He had experience.
He had experience.
Huh, that's very interesting. So it's good that you had that support as well. And the theme that we keep getting around to is having support,
Yeah,
reaching out for
finding
help.
support.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to get it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. Like, you got to figure it out. You
Mhm.
have to figure out who your village is.
Yeah.
You have to figure out. And if it's not somebody that's benefiting the overall goal for your child or benefiting you,
Mhm.
like, there's nothing like a little respite aid, people.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a little respite aid, somebody to just give you a break.
Mhm.
Because what happens a lot of times with the parents is people forget to even ask them, are you okay?
Yeah. Self-care becomes critically important.
Self-care.
Mhm.
I did not do it. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Mhm.
Self-care has never been my steal.
Mhm.
I've always been a giver. I've always been one who took care of I started in this business when I was a little girl,
Yeah.
only to help my family get out of their financial situation.
Mhm.
I realized, I could help them pay bills
Yeah.
at 5. So I was always conscious
Huh.
of everybody else, serving everybody else. I just didn't know that I needed time to be taken care of as well.
But you did take that 3 days.
3 days ain't nothing. I took the 3 days, but go ahead, finish your sentence.
I was half kidding. But you did know in that moment you needed to step back for a moment.
I did.
Allow yourself time to process these
I had to
emotions.
cry.
And then it was time for action.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's an important piece again, because there's so many parents that are watching this,
Mhm.
that are going to see this, and they're going through those exact same
Mhm.
scenario.
There's going to be times where you're going to cry. There's
Yeah.
going to be times where there's going to be so much joy. I remember hearing my son say, I love you for the first time.
How old was he when he said that?
Oh, God, he had to be about, just even putting 3 words together, about 8.
8 years old, yeah.
Whew.
That must have been a powerful moment for you.
I had my back towards him.
Mhm.
He was sitting on the floor playing with something or lining something up.
Yeah.
And I hear him say, I love you. And I turn and I look, and he looks up and he goes, yep, I love you. And like bawling, just those 3 words I never thought I would hear him say. It's the most amazing feeling. So there are going to be those joyful moments.
Mhm.
There are going to be those moments that's going to piss you off. Listen, let me tell you something. I had a lot of those.
I bet.
Listen, let me tell you something. Don't come for my kid, right? So one of the things that I did with my son, especially when it came to being overstimulated, I read a lot of Temple Grandin's
Mhm.
books and stuff, because that's all we had back
Yeah.
then.
Mhm.
And so she talked about how her mother would ease her into situations, and expose her to different situations. Like, they're in their own bubble, right? So I realized that I had to get him used to the rest of the world and all of we're talking senses.
Yeah.
It's overstimulated.
Yeah.
And they don't take it in like we do.
Exactly
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do is I would go to like a crowded place like a Cheesecake Factory. You can't get no louder than a Cheesecake Factory, right? I'd go to a Cheesecake Factory. I'd walk him into that little reception area
Mm-hmm.
and let him go to town. I mean, for most people, it looks like our child is exhibiting bad behavior or throwing a tantrum. When you think about all of the noises in a Cheesecake Factory, there's clinking of glasses
Yep.
and plates. There's people talking all at the same time. There's the air conditioner just humming, and you got all of this stimulation. And I would sit there and I'd go to the host. I go, my son and I are going to be here for 5 minutes. He is going to fall out on the floor, but I need to get him used to being in a restaurant. So I won't be long. And he come in, fall out on the floor, kicking and screaming, crying. And I go, it's only 5 minutes. I'd be explaining to him, this is a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
This is where people go to eat. And then I'd walk him out, come back the next day for 2 weeks. 2 weeks straight, and I'd elongate the time. It'd go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 minutes to sitting down to having a meal. And sometimes it would take us longer than 2 weeks. Sometimes it would take a month. But you got to have patience. Let them ease them into it.
Gradual exposure.
Exposure.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ABA Centers of America.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the other things you've done,
Sure.
particularly around the documentary that you produced, Colored My Mind. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that documentary has had, especially in the African-American, Latino
Well, let me just tell
communities?
you how it came about
Yes,
first.
please.
So I'm on the set of My Wife and Kids again. And sometimes you receive letters from supporters. I don't call people fans. I call them supporters. So I was receiving some support letters. And I got this one. And it was from the Shaka Khan Foundation. I was like, why is Shaka Khan hitting me? I don't really know Shaka like that. Right? Like, I've seen her, but I don't know her like that. So I start reading and they start talking about autism. Now, I was not out about my son. I was very protective at this point. I had even discussed it with other family members and said, there are people, I can handle what's going on in the media, but I don't know if Zen can. So we were closed mouth at first. But how is this person, Shaka Khan Foundation, knowing that my son is autistic? So I called them right away and I was like, I just received your letter. How is it that you know that I just got this diagnosis? She says, I didn't. I was just reaching out to you to see if we could work together.
Really?
And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, does Shaka have a child on the spectrum? And she says, no, her sister does. And her sister is a manager. I want to introduce you and I'd like to meet with you. They came over and we talked and we started talking about all of the things that we could do. We started talking about creating a charity that is specifically for people of color, so that we can connect them with resources, give them support, all of these things. And I thought it was an amazing idea. And we called it Colored My Mind. And then it just so happened, we were like, we should do a documentary about what it's like to get this diagnosis. And you can see I was just as aggressive on, in the movie as I am right now. And so we decided to do that, and it actually affected so many individuals who were so grateful and thankful that we did something like this. But what it also did was it opened us up. I was working on another show at that time. And the White House, we had gotten invited to try to help this bill, the Reauthorization of Autism Act. The money was already there. We had to go speak to Congress. So the 5 of us, now I'm the only celeb other than Shaka.
Right.
Everybody else, there's a housewife, There's the woman that I spoke about
Mhm.
earlier, the principal from Carson
Right.
with the 23-year-old daughter who couldn't speak nonverbal. She was also not potty trained.
Mhm.
She just didn't get the resources that
Yeah.
we got. Anyway, so it was the six of us. We decided to go to Congress. We had one day to do it.
Hmm.
It takes months to get a bill
Yeah.
passed. It was during the Obama administration, and what was interesting was the person that was backing the bill, nobody liked him. Nobody. So we had to go in there and convince him that this was a nonpartisan issue,
Right.
that this is about our families, these are about our babies,
Mhm.
and our children. If they're not diagnosed, if they're misdiagnosed, some of them even go to jail
Yeah.
because they're misdiagnosed. They don't get the same resources. And so we were even able to rewrite the bill. We didn't have to ask for any more money. The money was already there. It was already allotted. And so we got to rewrite the bill so that the disparities weren't as great
Mhm.
for children of color. And everybody was going to benefit from it.
Right.
So we got in there, and when we started to tell our stories, so many people backed us, and we got that bill passed.
Nice.
We got that
That's
bill passed.
fantastic.
So that's what that movie allowed us to do.
You also wrote a children's book, which
I did,
which
with my brother.
Yeah, I think that's just so great because whenever there is a child in the household that has some sort of difficulty, whether
Yeah.
it's autism or a physical disability,
Yeah.
or there's so much attention put on that one child,
Mhm.
and then the other siblings can often get kind of lost in the mix.
Yeah.
But this book was geared towards that, correct?
It was geared towards the siblings.
Yeah, tell us a little bit
It
about
was
that.
geared towards, well, at the time, Zen was just at school age. We waited to have our second child about 8 years because I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure Zen was at least
Situated.
established
Right.
and okay.
Right.
And so it was school age, and I had to go into his school and talk to the other children about what autism
Yeah.
was. And I had drawn these things about how they think and how, one of the typical kids might have thought. They were like, does he have like a superpower? I was like, you can consider it a superpower. It was really cool. And so the way that I explained it was so that they could have an affinity
Yeah.
for my child. And so it made me want to write a book because I hadn't had my second son yet, but it made me want to write a book so that more children could have more of an understanding for this challenge and more of an affinity for children who are challenged with this diagnosis.
You explained this to the classroom? Is that
I
was the
explained
situation?
what autism was to the
Right.
classroom, and it just motivated me to write this children's
And did the
book.
classroom kind of rally around
They
him?
rallied around my son
Isn't that interesting?
so much. And I said to them, you can't always let him get away with stuff that just because he has this, label. For me, and I think this is really important for every single parent to understand, it is important to accept the diagnosis.
Mhm.
You don't have to accept the label.
Yeah.
But you damn sure got to accept the diagnosis, because the quicker you do that, the more help you can give to your child.
Exactly.
The more, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I wasn't with the labels, but I was like, you're going to figure it out.
I think for our listeners, it's very important. You've heard it multiple times now. Early intervention is critical. Accepting it is critical. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone or you don't need
Right.
support to get through it. All of your emotions are valid. It is totally normal to go through a host of emotions, and not just in the beginning, not just for 3
Yes.
days, but ongoing throughout the course of this.
Oh, see, we were talking about emotions. I
Yeah.
got distracted, but let me tell you. So at the Cheesecake Factory, this woman, poor lady, poor lady. Why did she say something to me about my child? And I let her have it. Listen, I don't always let people have it, but when they deserve it, well, maybe not the first behavioral therapist. She did not deserve that.
If you're out there, she apologizes.
I'm sorry, but But there are people who don't understand, and they go, can't you like do something with your child? I'm sorry, when you become a clinical therapist and understand what autism is, then you can talk to me about my child.
Exactly.
But until then, mind your business.
Yeah.
That's how I was. Okay. But then there are those other moments where I know you see me smiling and you do find the joy, because these kids became your child for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for the lighthearted. Like, this is, I'm a tough cookie, but I also had my vulnerable crying moments. I had those moments where I was thinking like, what did I do?
Mm-hmm.
Did I not eat the right things? But no, do your research too, because you can find out so much about how the brain works. It's such an amazing, pliable
It's fascinating
organ, right? And it's not you. You have to know that it's not you, and that the senses do play a very big role in the development of a child.
Mm-hmm.
The senses, my son, the way that I would explain it is, if my son were to eat a peach, if you were to eat a peach, you feel the peach fuzz when you bite into it, it'd be sweet and whatever it is, But with my son, the peach fuzz might burn his skin.
Mm-hmm.
With my son, it might feel like rocks in his mouth. It might smell completely different than it smells to you.
Yeah.
So we have to get him used to the world around him. And that's how I looked at everything. My son would, even now, he's mouth almighty, tongue everlasting. He doesn't stop talking. Thank God. But when he was able to explain certain things, I said, Zen, do you remember banging your head on the floor and on the walls and stuff? Do you remember that? He was like, yeah. I said, what was that? He says, oh, when your foot falls asleep? I said, yeah, and you kind of bang it like that. I said, that's how I felt.
Huh.
Now, I never heard that before. And that's his
interpretation.
That's his interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And he said, I would bang it so I could feel it.
Huh.
And I go, wow. And that's fascinating.
And anybody's watching that, therapists, doctors, parents, they're going to think it's something completely different.
It breaks your heart.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that he used to do that would break my heart, because I have OCD, is he would lick public banisters and railings. I was losing my mind. I was like, he's going to get hepatitis.
It's exposure, right?
But again, his all of this was not operating the way that we understand it.
Did you ask him about that too, while he was doing that?
I didn't. He didn't remember doing it.
Okay.
But what I did was, early on, and this may sound bad, guys, there's no rules to anything, but I remember coming across a list of stimulatory behaviors that are publicly acceptable and some that aren't. Right? And he was on that aren't list. But the ones that were publicly acceptable, okay. Now y'all might think this is bad, and I accept that, but it worked for us. So instead of him licking public banisters and walls and railings and escalators, I taught him how to bite his nails.
Better than licking escalators.
Listen, y'all can talk about me if you want to, but I taught him how to bite his nails. Now I had to unteach him to bite his nails, but it was better. Now all I had to worry about was keeping his hands sanitized, but it was better than. You
know what I find fascinating about what you just said is children who are nonverbal.
Yeah.
They're kind of living and almost trapped inside their own minds.
Like their own bubble.
And you see all these behaviors and we're interpreting it as this or that. And then years later, he can speak.
And
it's nothing like what you thought. That's fascinating to me.
Isn't that great?
It really is.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ABA Centers of America.
It's great. I want you guys to know that with Zen, he would line his toys up. Trains, cars, animal figurines. He would just line them up. And so I would come home and again engage. And I would sit down on the floor with him and I would literally try to teach him how to play, because playing is such a big part of the brain's development. That's what floor time is. That's a big part of ABA.
Yes.
Applied behavior, for those who don't know, applied behavior analysis. Oh, I said that right.
You did.
But he would line these things up and I would sit on the floor and I would teach him how to play with the animals or the cars. The cars go vroom, 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 or the animals, just teaching him. And he would be back and looking at me and then I would fling some like Play-Doh at him and he would like be screaming. I remember him screaming like he was being burned by fire
Right.
when he would touch it. Hugs. I asked him about hugs and kisses because he would, he still tenses up, but he would do this. And I go, how does a hug and kiss feel years later? And he was like, it feels like it's hurting my skin.
Huh.
So I would prompt him or tell him, hey, mommy's about to touch you. Mommy's about to give you a hug, so that he doesn't have to, just getting them used to the world outside of their bubble is so important.
Absolutely. The world's not going to adapt to him.
No.
And you realize that.
Honey, no.
Yeah.
Especially being an African-American boy. They're already going to have assumptions. So these same animals that he was, obsessed with just lining up, I started to buy him books about the subject matter. I started to show him visuals on the television. I started to take him to movies that had anything to do with like penguins or anything. I would take him to the zoo. His obsession, you guys, became a vocation. I am very proud to say that my son is in college studying to be an animal conservationist.
That's fantastic.
He is taking public speaking courses because he wants to be a zoologist, and he's working right now in a zoo.
I was going to ask, what's his superpower? I think we just figured it out. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he's been, and like he just started to memorize everything about every single animal in the daggone planet. And so he just started to he knew where he wanted to go to college. He knew at 8 years old, I'm sorry, that's too early. At 12 years old, he knew where he wanted to go to college. He was putting sentences together and he just is my hero. He is my miracle. And I have to attribute my village and early intervention to where he is today. Not everybody is on the same, place in the spectrum. And I do acknowledge that. But for us, this is our story and this is what we did.
Does he have a favorite animal?
I don't think he does. Right now he's working at the zoo with the smaller animals, the possums, some kind of meerkat, I don't know, an eagle, and he's working his way up to the cats.
I think it's important once again to point out that all the things that you're mentioning, the applied behavioral analysis therapy, the play, the interactive play on the ground, the floor time, as you mentioned, getting eye level with him, looking for those reactions, the work with the therapist. You mentioned the village. I'm assuming some of them came around at some point.
Oh, they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, good.
They didn't have a choice, so they wouldn't be around my son.
That's right.
My village is so amazing. Like even, some of my friends, there were the friends that I could cry to. There were the friends that would, pump me up and you can do this. I've had so many different people who have supported me over the years. And I say me because the parent needs the support.
Yes, I could not agree more. You cannot do this alone. If you have great family support, great, good for you. That's great luck. If you don't have it, you need to go out and find it and get it.
Find something, even if it's the therapist.
That's right.
Or, take advantage of, we have the regional center out here in California, and they help with resources and placement of your child. You're going to need people to help you advocate
Yes.
for your child. Again, as you can see, I'm a pretty tough cookie. I cry. I've been down, but for the most part, I'm gonna fight. Push me in a corner, and I'm gonna fight for my kid.
That brings me to another question. In what ways do you think educators, healthcare professionals, doctors, schools, how can we do better?
We all have to educate ourselves
Yes.
about the subject matter and understand it. We have to, especially the people who affect us mostly in the community, which are, you know, the healthcare providers, the
Mhm.
teachers. Me and my brother started with the police department. My
Mhm.
brother was a lieutenant in the police force. We started a movement
Huh.
called DOPE, De-escalation of Officer Patrol Encounters.
Mhm.
And we started it because of Zen.
Mhm.
So a family member was at my house. Zen was much older. He was talking, he was verbal at this point. He's a teenager. And for the first time, he walked to the store by himself when I wasn't there.
Uh-oh.
Right? So when I get home, I'm like, where's my son? Where's Zen? And the family member says, oh, I let him walk to the store. He said he wanted to walk to the store, so I let him walk to the store. I said, okay, did you prepare him? Did you
Mm.
prepare him for what would happen if you ran into a gang member?
Right.
What would happen if you ran into a police officer?
Mhm.
And he was like, no, he just went to the store.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God. Me and my brother is like, okay, just calm down. So when Zen walks into the room, I said, Zen, how was your walk? He said, it was good. It was good. I said, okay, Zen, me and Uncle Stan want to ask you a few questions. If you had run into a cop, you know, and they said, hey, we want to, stop. We want to talk to you. What would you have done? He says, oh, well, and he puts his hands behind his back. I said, Jesus Christ, Lord help us. He's going to get himself killed. So then me and my brother sat him down and was like, because you look the way you look, a lot of children that are on the spectrum don't look like they're on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of the movements that they make, it could be tics, it could be whatever, can come across as non-compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brother and I started this movement where my brother gets police officers and cars, fake rubber guns,
Mm-hmm.
and we teach children on the spectrum and not children, but young adults on the spectrum, driving age and what have you, how to be stopped. We also teach the police officers about autism.
Absolutely.
And we give speeches and we have we break things down, what it looks like. A couple of years ago, there was a nurse of an autistic young man who was the autistic young man was in the middle of the street with, I think it was like a toy car or something. And he was about, I don't know, 18, maybe years old, 17, 18 years old. And his nurse was like, no, no, no. He's autistic. He doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have a gun. And they shot the nurse.
Oh.
And so getting people to understand that, we have to figure out ways to help them. So what me and my brother do is we get the police officers to do two different stops, an escalated one and a de-escalated one, so that they could practice, because they will at some point be at driving age.
And that's exactly what we're doing here as well, right? It's not just the doctors or the therapists or the family members, but it's our public servants and people in the community.
We have to school them.
Yes, we do. I'd like to ask you a little bit about charities. What charities are you currently working with or supporting? How can we get involved? How can we help?
Well, there's always Colored My Mind, and I am currently working with my shero, Dr. Pamela Wiley at the Los Angeles Speech and Language Center. She was the first person who helped me with Zen, the first speech therapist. She took $5,000 and started her own language and speech therapy. She doesn't turn anybody away.
Wow.
It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter whether you're a celebrity or not. You're going to get the same amount of treatment that you
Excellent.
get, the love that she gets. And you know what else she does? She partnered up with UPS and Outback, and they set up a restaurant and I don't know, a mailing station
Mhm.
in her offices to teach
Very
the young
interesting.
adults.
Very interesting.
Yes, to teach the young adults a vocation.
Yeah.
And so she's partnered up with them. And that was one of my son's first jobs was at Outback.
Really?
Yes.
What did he do?
He was a busboy.
That's great.
My son understands servitude. My son, that's one thing that I really put into him.
Mhm.
It is an honor to serve other people. So he's worked everywhere from Outback to Chick-fil-A
To the zoo.
to the zoo to the vocation of his choice.
Finally, I think if you had to pick one message for parents out there that are just learning this diagnosis in their children, or for families who are really struggling and don't know what to do, what would you say to them?
That's hard. That's a hard one. There's so much to say. I hate to be cliche like Holly, but it does get better. Take a moment to breathe when you can, parents. And you're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to engage. I mean, there's moments where you're going to have to take a break and get a babysitter or some respite aid.
Mhm.
Even when the therapist is there, be in the room with your child.
Yeah.
Learn of what they're doing and then
Mhm.
apply it when they leave.
Exactly. This is so critical.
That's so
Mhm.
critical. Like you can't just think that they're the babysitter
That's
for
right.
it so you could take a break. That's not what they are there for. They're there to help your child try to bridge the gap
Mhm.
between our world and theirs. And so you have to be in there learning at the same time. This is a lot of work. That's why I
Yes.
say take your breaks, cry, be joyful, find what their thing is. Zen's thing was animals and numbers and letters.
Mhm.
Find out what their thing is and find a way to reach them through that.
Harness it.
Harness
Yeah.
it. You're reaching your child. That's the reach. Find out what that reach is and love on yourselves. I think it's just not enough said about parents and family members who are affected by this diagnosis. We focus on the child that has this challenge, but the challenge is also for the parents.
I think I'm going to harp on that just one more time for all of our listeners out there. This is an incredibly daunting challenge, one that can be accomplished. But without self-care, it often doesn't work.
Yep.
You have to take that time for yourself.
Yes.
You have to get the support you need to get through this, but you can do this. And it starts with topics like today and bringing awareness to the public. It starts with bringing awareness to our educators, to our teachers, to our law enforcement officers, to our firemen, public servants. And it is advanced through interviews like this and the time that you've given us today.
And there's hope.
And there is hope.
There is hope.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like that. And like you said, it could be daunting. But gosh, every little small win is a huge win for that baby.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
You mentioned something so critically important, and that is educating not only ourselves, not only our families, but local law enforcement,
Yeah.
public figures. What is the organization that you work with that's driving that change?
Yes, it's called DOPE. That was founded by myself and my brother, Stanley Campbell, retired lieutenant in the Oklahoma Police Department. And DOPE stands for De-escalation of Officer Patrol Encounters. You can find us we have a website of that name. We do work alongside with my shero, Dr. Pam Wiley. And that particular organization, her organization is called the Los Angeles Speech and Therapy Center. And that is specifically for kids and young adults. And they don't age out. So
Fantastic. I encourage all our listeners to visit the websites of DOPE, and the second one was called again?
the Los Angeles Speech and Therapy Center.
Los Angeles Speech and Therapy Center. To learn more about the spectrum, please visit abacenters.com. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ted Bender.